Kemi Badenoch, great to have you with us. Re-elected in North West Essex, formerly the constituency of Saffron Walden. Conor Burns, good to have you with us too. You are declared now as a leadership candidate. You want to be the leader of His Majesty's opposition. And yet, in recent days, there have been lots of newspaper allegations about you, about your conduct as a minister, anonymous briefings by civil servants, and you've described those newspaper articles on social media as a hit job.
Yes.
Why do you think that's happening?
Because people are worried about my candidacy. The paper that's doing it is The Guardian, and since the very minute I was elected, The Guardian has written nasty article after nasty article because I take a different position on their worldview. Whether it's on race, where I have been very robust on what I think we should do as a country. This is not a racist country, and we have been getting along very well until people started stoking identity politics. I hate identity politics, and The Guardian loves it. That and being a gender critical woman. So the idea that I become a party leader is threatening to them. And this is a story that they've been trying to run for over a year. Many civil servants have given contrary views. They refuse to publish them. They've refused to do anything except mix lots of different stories by one person to use to attack me. And I think that's a real shame. But what it really points to is what happens if you are somebody who dares to speak out. People are always asking me, why is no one saying anything about this? This is a scandal. This is terrible. Why doesn't anyone do this? Why doesn't anyone sack this person who's been appointed and is doing a terrible job? This is why. Because if you stick your head above the parapet, if you say this is wrong, if you sack people who are doing a bad job, they can just go to a paper like The Guardian, and they can be anonymous and they can make up lots of stuff. But because they've said it, The Guardian will print it. And at the end of it, they'll print a small denial. And many people are scared of that. Many people don't want the hassle. And as ministers, I'm sure Conor would have found the same thing. We are coached not to intervene. Don't say anything. Oh, it might be a breach of the ministerial code. Or, you having a tit for tat with this person is not a good look. Just rise above it. So everybody's rising above it, but nothing's getting better. Whereas my view is that if something's broken, you should speak up and try and fix it. And I'll never stop doing that. It doesn't matter how many nasty stories The Guardian writes about me. I will always be there speaking up for Telegraph readers, for example, because if they're attacking me, they're not attacking somebody else, and I can take it.
So you think there are civil servants who have been deliberately trying to damage you, damage other Conservative colleagues, whether in government or in opposition?
Well, I think what was really interesting about that story was the text message, which is now public, which the writer, Pippa Crerar, was sending to...
That's the Guardian journalist.
Yes, that's the Guardian journalist. We're sending to lots of civil servants. And what it does is it actually damages the relationship between officials and ministers. If anybody can be encouraged to break the ministerial code, the civil service code, and make up stories because they don't like a minister, every minister, doesn't matter whether you're a Conservative or whether you're Labour, every minister is going to have their hands tied behind their backs because anyone in the room could damage them so easily. And that's not good for the running of the country. I don't want this to happen to even Labour ministers. Everyone should be free to do their job. And it's really sad because this story is damaging for the civil servants who I worked with, who were great. This person who was writing this was actually a volunteer on my campaign who joined the civil service on a fixed term contract to be a personal assistant. So all of this stuff was in her job description. And I don't want to get into the details of it because it's actually a distraction. It's the bigger picture that we should look at, that if you want ministers who are going to speak out, you look at all the tension that we've been seeing in the country, over the last few days in Southport and Hartlepool. Everybody's quiet. They're not saying anything because they don't want to upset The Guardian. They don't want to upset that cultural establishment that wants to pretend that nothing's going on.
What should they be saying?
They should.
What's going unsaid?
What is going unsaid is that we need to have a clearer strategy on integration, which we don't have at the moment. Instead, we just pretend that everything is fine and it's a few bad eggs, which is sometimes the case. But if you want to have a successful multiracial country, you need to make an effort to do it. You can't just pretend that there are no tensions. And we've been seeing this not just between ethnic minorities and white British people, even between ethnic minorities. This is not normal. And we had a great commission that was set up in 2021, the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities. All the people on there were ethnic minorities from
The Sewell
everyday
Commission.
life. Yes, the Sewell Commission, not race relations industry people, but doctors, teachers, policemen, and they came out and wrote what they think should be done to help make sure that we continue to be well integrated. All of that stuff is now being scrapped by Labour. All the stuff that we did on, trans guidance for schools, it's all being unpicked. Everything. So even when people said we didn't do things, the things that we did do are being unpicked, and I think that that's going to be really bad for the country going forwards.
I want to bring Conor in just one moment, if I may, but on the Sewell Commission, because we may not get time to come back to it. The Sewell Commission, of course, concluded that it didn't find Britain to be institutionally racist. Tony Sewell is a very proud South Londoner of Jamaican heritage who wanted to assert that his lived experience, if you like, of being a black Londoner, there had been ups and downs, there had been bumps in the road, but he was tremendously grateful and his family were tremendously grateful to the opportunity that the UK had given them. Do you feel the same way?
I do. And if you look at the reaction that Dr. Sewell and the Commission had, it was unbelievably negative, again, from that cultural media establishment. Lots of people brought on into the news stations to pillory them. They've never experienced things like that before. They weren't public figures. And the point I'm trying to make is that people like Tony Sewell, he's Lord Sewell now, I should say, people like those commissioners, people like me, get attacked because we are trying to defend the country. And that is to send a signal to other ethnic minorities who agree with us that if you speak up, you will be in trouble. We will come after you unless you are shouting about how racist everything is. So the incentive is given for those people who want to complain and say everything is terrible. Come on the show, accuse everybody of racism. The people who say, hang on, there's a different side to it, are accused of aiding white supremacists or being in it for themselves. And so fewer and fewer people will come out and speak up. And that's the culture of silence that I want to break. If I am the leader of the opposition, we're not going to be having that anymore. It's not about having a fight. It is about speaking the truth. The whole of my campaign, which I will be launching in September, right now I'm going around the country listening to members. It's about truth. If we had been honest about a few more things, I think we'd still be in government today. And it was just the keeping quiet rather than speaking out frustrates the general public, and then they start deciding that only a party like Reform will tell it like it is, which is not the case. Conservatives should be the one telling it like it is.
Conor Burns, let's bring you in. You were, of course, Minister of State for Trade. You were Minister in the Northern Ireland office, and then in October 2022, you were accused of misbehaviour. You can describe it in your own words at the Tory party conference. You lost your job. And for a very long time, those accusations, those allegations, now completely rescinded, completely cleared by an internal Conservative Party investigation. We can't stress that enough. But that must have really hurt you. So how do you think your experience is relevant to Kemi Badenoch's experience and with her civil servants?
I think they fit to the same genre, but they're different. Firstly, they're character testing when you go through these things. However outwardly strong one presents oneself, they hurt. And they hurt, most importantly, those around you.
Yes, that's
and
right.
Those who love you.
Yeah.
And that actually compounds your own sense of emotion about it. By the way, I still don't know to this day what I'm supposed to have done. There was actually no complaint, which is bizarre. I had a hit job. I think what Kemi's going through, it is perversely a compliment because she terrifies them because she doesn't conform to stereotypes. I worked with a lot of ministers over the years, both as a minister myself and as a parliamentary private secretary in, I think, 5 different government departments. I have never seen a Secretary of State run a department in the way that Kemi ran the department. Her officials knew that if she set her mind to something, she had these stars to steer by at fixed points in the firmament and the compass to guide her. She was not merely, as many ministers are, a slave to what officials put in the in tray. And I think what you're seeing there is a manifestation of that fear. Kemi discombobulates them, a person who does not conform to stereotypes that they think she should fit. And I have to say, I mean, on a number of occasions, when I was doing the trade stuff for Kemi in the US with the states of the US and various officials.
So she was trade secretary.
She was trade secretary, and no, I'd been brought. I think I lasted less time than the lettuce in that role before I was taken out. But the Prime Minister then gave me this envoy role, and Kemi said, "Well, look, you know this so well. Why don't you go using my authority and do these memorandums of understanding with the states?"
And of course, we did a trade deal with Texas.
We did,
and Florida.
And we just
These
got to
are major
agreement.
economies in their own right.
They are,
Yes.
and we just got to agreement in principle with Virginia just before we called the election.
We had many state level deals done. But the reason why I made Conor a trade envoy is because when things go wrong, I like to make sure that someone makes it better and that we can fix things. I hate bullies. I hate people who try and ruin other people's lives. And where I can step in and make it better, I will do that. So Conor had lost his ministerial job because random people had, made accusations and then didn't follow them through enough for it for him to be clearly exonerated. But the damage was done, and when damage is done, I think you should try and fix that, and that's what I was trying to do in that situation. And the point he makes about families is really important. I remember when my dad was dying, the Guardian ran a story about how I was a homophobe, and it really distressed him.
Only very recently, I believe it's 2022.
He died in 2022. Yes, this was late 2021. There was, again, a fake story about a recording that never materialized where I was supposed to have been making homophobic comments, which is not true. I've never felt that way before. I never will. But he had to read that while he had a brain tumor. And I always remember that he was suffering and these people were writing these nasty things and making his life, his last few months on earth, even worse. My mother's reading the stories now. My children hear about it. When people make fun of my surname and call me Badenoch, my children hear about it. It gets on the playground. It's not right. But nobody sees that because it's all a big game. And I think that somebody needs to stand up to just the way we carry out discourse on politicians and just on anyone in public life, to be honest. It's not just about politicians. We can do better than this, and that will help make the country better.
How do you feel about those civil servants who are allegedly saying things which are then being reported anonymously? Are they trying to ruin your life?
So it's not, I don't want it to be about civil servants because it happens, everybody does it. The example that Conor gave wasn't civil servants. There are some brilliant civil servants and there are some terrible ones. It's like in any office. But the point I'm trying to make is that we are creating a society where the people who follow the rules get punished and the people who break the rules get away with it. So civil servants who want to brief and leak to the media don't get caught, don't get punished. The ones who want to say, give a counter story are told, you're not allowed to talk to the press, so you probably shouldn't do that. So they follow the rules. The person who's broken the rules to leak to the press gets away with it. That for me is a bigger problem than if one civil servant or another doesn't like me. You're never going to be in a place where everybody loves you. Our job as politicians is to make difficult decisions. Whatever party you are, whatever you do, someone somewhere is not going to like it. If you go into politics wanting to be loved or thinking it's X factor, you end up not dealing with the serious problems. And I think this is how we've ended up trying to please everybody. We'll do this. And you look at a lot of the legislation we had in Parliament, so much of it was on animal welfare, banning puppy farming, stopping live exports for animals, debating the sentience of crustaceans. We did lots of animal welfare stuff because everybody likes dogs and everybody likes their pets. But that is not what we are sent there to do. We are sent there to do difficult things. And that's what I went into politics to do. That things are broken. How can you sit there and just see all these things? People tell me, oh, she's angry. I'm like, shouldn't you be angry if something's not working and something's not right, rather than just sitting back and accepting it? But if you have strong opinions and if you try and change things, then there is pushback. There are many people who are just happy with the status quo. don't cause a fuss, just leave it alone, everything is fine. But we can all see that things aren't fine. We managed to try and get the economy going, but it should be going gangbusters. It should be rocket fueled. That's what we should be doing, not just managing the status quo, or worse, managing decline. That's not what I'm about. And if I'm leading the Conservative Party, there's going to be a lot of energy, there's going to be a lot of optimism about the UK. But I don't want us to get bogged down in micro policy debates when there are bigger fundamentals at work, which is, who are we? What are we about? What do we want to be? Are we still the party of the right when there's a challenge from there? What did we do wrong? How did we get that wrong? Those are questions that we need to answer if the public are going to ever trust us again. And right now, judging from that last election, they don't.
And there's a really important point in here, which goes back to the civil service. Too many ministers, over the last 14 years in particular, have been very good at mastering the brief that has been given to them, not writing the brief of what they want to do. And Kemi is not cut from that cloth. She came in knowing what she wanted to do in all her portfolios. And when the civil service get used to people who are mastering the set brief of the department, that's a bit of a culture shock. But you've got to know what you want to do. And our failures, in my view, are because we weren't clear, we weren't ambitious enough. Do I object to the ending of puppy farming? No. Does Kemi? Absolutely not. I love dogs too.
Yeah.
I'm sure Kemi does too.
I do.
Sentience of animals and all of that. That's all great stuff, but you can do other things as well.
Exactly.
Peter Mandelson says you're the candidate that Labour fear most. Do you think he's right?
I do. I mean, I have friends in the Labour Party, and they, Labour MPs, and they message me when things happen and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe you just said that. You are so right," and they are so scared of you. So I know that they are worried, because I would present a totally different style of politics, which will be a lot more transparent. And everything that I have done has been, certainly as a minister, has worked. I've never had many of the problems that other ministers run into. The things I wanted to deliver mostly got delivered, and where they didn't, it was because of a compromise or a change in policy. So if you look at the space where I really dominated, was on the equality side. On business and trade, I had to compete with many other departments, the Treasury and so on, in terms of getting a policy through. But on equalities, I was able to lay out a whole slew of things that we needed to do. We needed to make sure that the CAS review happened back in 2020, working with Matt Hancock to do that. We needed to make sure that people understood what these things meant, getting guidance out. Lots of obstacles, being put by the civil service sort of status quo, having to overrule them. Oh, you shouldn't meet these people. It'll be breaking the code. It'll be breaking the code. And I said, I don't think this is breaking the code. Meeting people like Kira Bell, a young lady who detransitioned, that fundamentally changed the way that I looked at everything. They told me not to meet her. And
the civil service told you not to meet Kira
Yes, they said
Bell.
It would not be appropriate. And then they gave me the list of approved organisations. Stonewall.
And how did they respond when you said, no, actually, I do want to meet Kira Bell, this young woman who had a double mastectomy and then massively regretted it?
Yeah. So the way I did it was just get more cooperative people, to people who understood what the ministerial work that I wanted to deliver was about. You can't sack civil servants, which is why this Guardian story is very confusing, because the person who's claimed to be a civil servant wasn't quite that. But you can move them somewhere else and bring in people who are there to deliver your agenda. One of the things that is creating a problem now, I think, in the civil service is that they are confusing impartiality for independence.
Yes.
So instead of being neutral and apolitical, they think, oh, well, I don't like that. This is what I think you should do. And I'm independent, you're political. So you have politicians being made to be civil servants, the civil servants becoming campaigners for their own policies. I look at what's happened to the Home Office. Many Home Office staff have come from refugee campaigning charities. I had my staff who were in equalities. They'd come from gay rights charities and so on. So people are going into the civil service with their own agenda.
To be activists?
I don't think they think they're being activists. They think that they are on the side of the righteous. They don't think that they're activists. They think that they are correct. And they think that we are too political. And when we become ministers, we shouldn't be political. Whereas I'm a politician. I'm always going to be political. I'm not there to be neutral. I will treat everybody fairly, but I will treat them in a conservative, in a conservative way. That in our definition of fairness, not Labour's definition of fairness. What they want to do is bring in quite often what is a left-wing view of what fairness is and try and get you to subscribe to that. And I always push back against that. If I wanted to be a Labour MP, I'd be a Labour MP. I'm a Conservative MP. That means I do Conservative things.
Is that your experience too?
Absolutely. I used to describe it, and we experienced this in the United States, that some very senior people would think from the official side of government, not the elected side, that they were in fact co-decision makers,
Yes.
rather than there
Very
to
true.
represent and follow the instructions of those who are elected. We are servants. I'm not anymore because I was thrown out, but members of Parliament and ministers are servants to the House of Commons, which is the democratic cockpit that the nation elects. The civil servants, in that very technical sense, are the servants of the elected governments. They are there to implement the policies on which the government is elected, and their secretaries of state and ministers, and they're not there as veto-wielding colleagues.
But the people who hate it the most are their other colleagues. So the civil servants who are there to be impartial, who want to get on with it, are very frustrated by the 5-10% who are going there with their own agenda. It's only a small number. And this is where making sure that we protect the institution of the civil service and make it better, rather than attacking them all the time, is important, because it's not all of them. I don't even think it's the majority of them.
It's a very small number, actually.
How does it make you feel that the civil service has been giving lots of taxpayers' money to Stonewall for quite a few years?
Well, I don't think it's fair to blame civil servants. Ministers, not me, but other ministers, didn't think that there was anything wrong with it. And this is where I think a lot of politics has gone wrong. I think there's a lady who I follow on Twitter. I think she may write for the Telegraph, actually, Charlotte Gill, and she documents how a lot of public money is spent on things it really shouldn't be spent on. And what happens, I'll tell you how it happens. You're in Parliament, an MP stands up and says, my constituent wants to know what the government is doing, to promote LGBT rights. And the minister's like, oh, well, what can we do? We can give them some money. Who can we give money to? Oh, there's an organization called Stonewall. Are they okay? Yeah, they've got a reputation. They've been doing this for a long time. Let's give them some money. And then you can say back to that MP, we're doing a lot for LGBT rights. We've given money to Stonewall. And the same thing.
They're buying virtue with taxpayers' money.
Exactly. And it's not just on things like identity politics. It's everything from what are you doing to help refugees? What are you doing to help asylum seekers? What are you doing to help people who move to the country learn English or, get into art? So you end up paying for arts courses for people actually who need to be getting a job. You end up, funding lots of programs at universities in particular that are not going to add any productivity to the country. And if you look at what is happening in our economy, I think that we're finding fewer and fewer people doing work that I would describe as productive. Entrepreneurs, people who are setting up businesses, creating jobs. Instead, we have a lot of people who are living off government. They don't even know they're living off government, but they are. I mean, I always tell this story about. I don't know if I've told you this story before. I was out at a club and I met a man who recognized me, and he came up, wanted to talk about politics, and I said, "What do you do?" And he said, I run hotels. This was just after COVID. I said, "Oh, this must be terrible. Business must be really terrible. I'm so sorry." And he said, "No, business has never been better." And I said, "How?" He said, "Well, because my hotels are full of asylum seekers." That is not what that person should be doing. Absolutely. And he's not doing anything wrong, but he should be running a hotel for tourists, not for asylum seekers. That's government money, that's taxpayers' money. And we have many people who are beginning to move into jobs like that because government is creating more work. The state is getting bigger and bigger. And we need to really think about how we totally redesign the system. And that's why I want this campaign to be about us looking at all those issues from the ground up, not just saying what we should have done last time. It's going to be very easy during this leadership contest to fight the last battle. We shouldn't. We've got to look at the future.
Just before we come on to a quick run through some policy thoughts, you are, of course, in listening mode. But before we come on to that, a little bit of background. Why do you want to be Conservative leader, Kemi? It's obviously politics is a contact sport. There's lots of aggro for you and your family. You have 3 young children. What's driving you to want not just to be in politics, but to want the top job in your party at such a difficult time?
I think, to be honest, it will be a very, very difficult thing to do. But I always tell people I like doing difficult things. But it's not about wanting the job. The job in and of itself is going to be a burden, in the sense that there's a lot of public scrutiny. Your time no longer belongs to you, but it's what you can do with it. So it's not about the job. So if you're leader of the opposition, if you're leader of your party, there's so much that you can do to make things better. I love the Conservative Party. It's my family. I met my husband there, and it's a part of my life. I don't want to see it wither away. I'm very worried that we are at an existential point where the party could end up going the way of the Liberals in the early 20th century and being replaced by something else. I don't think that would be a good thing. Institutions matter. Conservative Party is an institution. And that's why my campaign isn't called Kemi for Leader. It's called Renewal 2030. The party's got to renew. I think the last 14 years have used up a lot of our energy. We are fatigued. So let's start fresh. Let's renew. Let's think about what do we want to do for the next decade, rather than what should we have done last month. That, I think, is what's going to help turn things around. And that is what I find really exciting. It's going to be really exciting to, take the Conservative Party in a fresh direction and make it better, get more members. Let's just do politics in a different way. The world is changing and we need to change with it. And I think that proposition is very exciting. If I don't get it, fine. I'll work with whoever does, because the party is more important than any one of us. It's more important than me as an individual. I cannot do it on my own. I'm going to need a whole team of people. And I'm really, really thrilled by the number of people who have said they're going to be supporting me, who want to help do that. And that's what it should be about.
You'll know, Conor Burns, that after the 1997 Labour landslide, there were a succession of Tory leaders who made it nowhere near government. Some of them didn't even make it to the next general election. Did you advise Kemi to go for the leadership now?
She's right that this is going to be really tough. Kemi's asking the right questions. And I said before we lost, because it was blindingly obvious we were going to lose, that the party needed someone who was going to ask not who should lead it, but why do they want to lead it? What do they want to do with it? And the fact that I think Kemi is asking the questions, what does our organisation look like? How do our values apply to the challenges of the next 30 years in the way that in the past we've successfully transformed decades in office, is the right starting point. You see, I still recognise this incredibly insightful, inquisitive young lady that I met like 19 years or so ago.
Yes, nearly 20.
What was she like?
Years. Well, she rocked up to. I had the preposterous title of Vice President of Conservative Future, which is an honorific title, the Youth Wing, which keeps changing its names, back to Young Conservatives again. And there was this sort of Christmas reception thing, and this incredibly bright live wire turned up in a denim jacket. Hair was bigger then. And
yours probably was as well, Conor.
Probably was. There was I certainly had more of it in certain key positions. And I was just immediately struck. Look, and I'm openly gay, so it wasn't. I didn't fancy Kemi in any way. But she was sort of asking, "Why are you doing this? What is this about? What? How do you campaign?" And I got in touch with Frances Maude the following day and said, "I met this incredible lady last night, and you've got to get her in." And she's the future of the party. And I still see that inquisitive, energetic, positive person who wants to affect change.
This is very kind.
The sensible thing for anybody, frankly, to do at the moment, we say, I tell you what, we'll let somebody else have a go at this, because this is going to be bloody tough, and we might not do this. But Kemi, there's something else I recognise, right? Mrs. Thatcher always used to talk, there's always a reason why. Mrs. Thatcher studied chemistry. She was a scientist. Kemi's an engineer. Mrs. Thatcher enjoyed fixing things, understanding, analysing problems, and then working out how to fix them. And I see that same thing with Kemi. It's a good thing, actually. There's not enough of it in politics. People who first find facts, then filter the facts and the challenge through the prism of their philosophical outlook, and then come up with policy. I think it's hugely exciting.
Conor Burns knew Baroness Thatcher extremely well, of course. That's well known among those of us who follow politics very closely. He's comparing you with Margaret Thatcher. How do you feel about that?
It's quite the compliment. It's very flattering, especially as she is someone who I admire so much. And one of the things about moving back to the UK, age 16, was seeing how people talked about Margaret Thatcher like she was a terrible person. That is not how she was seen in the rest of the world. When I was at school, and the boys in Lagos would say, women's places in the kitchen, you can't do this. They would say that. It was very, very misogynistic. And you would just say 2 words, Margaret Thatcher, and you would shut them up. She was the Iron Lady. She was a global icon. And I think it's very sad the way she's still, even now, talked about here. But it's always the left. Even though she's been gone now for 11 years, they are still obsessed with her, still trying to trash her reputation. And I think that is what happens to people who do good things, who make a mark on the world, that they impact people's lives to such an extent that they can never forget them. So it is. I think it's quite a heavy compliment. I think there's still quite a lot for me to do to be a Margaret Thatcher, but I also want to be someone who is seen for herself rather than someone trying to be someone else. You can admire a lot of people. I often talk about how it was the people who stood behind Margaret Thatcher who were the real heroes, because they were taking a risk by backing an unlikely person. And lots of people laughed at the concept of a female prime minister. The Labour people were saying, thank you, we've won the next election, and so on. How can you pick this ridiculous person? But the people who believe in truth and who can see a good character, who can see the character, as someone like Eri Neen, for example, who I admire a lot, saw in Margaret Thatcher. He's tragically killed, as you know. I mean,
he was, of course, her campaign leader to become the Conservative Party.
Yes, indeed.
Leader, beating Ted Heath, extremely unlikely. He was laughed at when he launched her campaign.
Yeah. So, people can laugh all they want. It's about what you are saying and if the public like it, rather than your political opponents or, media commentators, etc.
You said the Tories are in an existential crisis. Kemi, you had 365 odd MPs in the last parliament. You've now got 121. Why did you lose this election so badly? And does the party now need to shift to the left to compete with the Lib Dems and Labour? Or does the party need to shift to the right to see off the big threat from reform?
So I don't think it's about left or right. I think it's about right or wrong. Going to the left, that's what it is. That's what makes it existential. Is that we're facing threats from both sides. So saying, "Oh, should we move this way or should we move that way?" That's not. That is not what the problem is. It is something more fundamental, and we need to be. We need to start with being honest and real with ourselves, and have difficult conversations in private between ourselves, and then we can present something that's very clear to the public. Instead, we've been doing it the other way around, where everybody agrees in a room and no one says anything, and then we come out and start saying different things and the public are confused. So if you were to ask me why we lost, and I think Conor, who actually did lose his seat, will probably have a better answer. I think the seeds of our loss were sown in 2019, where we all stood on a platform of get Brexit done. And that was pretty much a single issue election. There was lots of other stuff in the manifesto, but it was really Brexit that we were voting on. And we got that done pretty quickly.
Well.
And then the disagreements started coming up. What do we do on COVID? Who likes lockdown? Who doesn't like lockdown? Vaccines, vaccine passports, there are disagreements on that. Some people want to build homes. Other people don't want to build homes. Many of the newer MPs wanted a bigger state because that's for them was what levelling up was. Others had a different view. And then we were just going all around. And those disagreements, to us, they looked just like disagreements. To the public, they looked absolutely awful. And I think that the point when we started losing was with the Owen Paterson issue, where on the inside, it looked to us like a colleague who clearly done something wrong, but his wife had killed herself. He had a terrible accident himself, and we didn't think that he was quite who he used to be, and the punishment was severe. So we thought we were dealing with an internal HR management issue. What the public saw was us like helping ourselves and letting someone go,
Looking
or
after your
wrongdoing,
own.
looking after it. That's what the public saw. So there's often this disconnect between what we think we're doing and what people's perception of that is. And that was the moment that everything started going wrong. That's when Boris started losing the by-elections, all the Partygate stuff, and we had the confidence vote. And you'll remember, Conor and I were telling the MPs, you have to support Boris. We would sit them down. We can't allow them to bring him down. So I was very supportive of him in the confidence vote. And then we had the Chris Pincher thing. And I told people, this is it. Nothing more is going to happen after this. And then the Chris Pincher thing happened. I myself said, I can't do this anymore. And but all of that just looked like chaos to some people. It was, of the 14 years, it was a very brief time, but it's taken over the whole narrative of what we did over 14 years. That's my assessment, or certainly one view.
A lot of Planet Normal listeners who write to Alison and I a great deal would say that they abandoned the Tories, they stayed at home, or they voted Reform because they felt the Conservatives weren't being Conservatives anymore. Immigration going to 725,000 in a single year, albeit with some particular circumstances, Hong Kong, Ukraine, and so on. Do you think the Conservatives were conservative enough?
Well, actually, I'll let Conor answer that, because you would have had a lot more. It's very easy to have sort of selection bias where the person who got through may have got through despite things. And so I'd like to hear your view. I'm curious as to what you saw in Bournemouth.
So we were behind on every age group below 70. We'd been there for a very long time. And Kemi is right that we appeared for a very long, the end of that period, we appeared to be very self-absorbed and interested in each other, and the media were very keen to get colleagues on, not to promote what the government was doing, but to slag each other off in code. This is a difficult thing for a Conservative to say, but I think the most authentically Conservative bit of the 14 years was the coalition period, where we were actually supposedly constrained. There we did the amazing Gove education reforms, we did the Ian Duncan Smith welfare reforms, and we tried to control spending. And I think Kemi is right that 2019 we won with the great advantage of Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, God-given gift that kept giving. And we had the political fracture of Bercow trying to become the executive and so on. And there was a great desire. I mean, I met passionate Remainers then who were voting for us just to bring an end to this and get it done. I didn't see the manifesto this time before it was published. Most candidates didn't. We've moved away from an involving of the whole party, where MPs, candidates, members feel that they have ownership
of the manifesto,
of what the government's going to do in their name. And that's why I think what you're talking about, Kemi, is the right thing to do.
Even as a cabinet minister, I had some input into my section, but there was a lot of stuff that I would have liked to have seen. And we can't do this. The Treasury says, we don't have the money.
As business secretary.
Yes, right? Yes, and we can't do that. So it's very hard. I think we need to get our members more involved. We need to get our MPs more involved, and then you will be able to deliver something that is quite visibly Conservative.
And can I just quickly on this? The Thatcher point, I'm not comparing Kemi to Margaret Thatcher. Her approach is very similar here. Successful governments do real hard work in opposition to prepare. There's a famous document for political anoraks like us called Stepping Stones, which was developed over many years in opposition, which mapped out what the government would do over months and years when it came to office. Everyone knew. Everyone was bought into it. And it started with Mrs. Thatcher applying the scientific thing. What went wrong? How would we do it differently? What can we learn? And crucially, what are the challenges of the next period of time? Not looking back and trying to redo what was done or not done, but looking to the future. And that's what's exciting about this, I think.
I do need to ask you, Kemi, again, if I may, what would you say to Planet Normal listeners, many of whom are Conservative members, even Conservative activists, who did stay at home, who felt your party over the last 5 years hasn't been acting like Conservatives, or at least the outcomes haven't been Conservative. Tax burden at a 70-year high. Immigration much, much higher than it was even before Brexit, when a reason that a lot of people voted for Brexit was to take back control of those borders.
I would start by saying I'm really sorry. we did let people down. I'm not going to pretend that it was great and people just didn't understand what we were doing. Even we as MPs felt let down. But it was that sort of incoherence of some people in the party wanting to do X and others wanting to do Y and us struggling to move forwards that caused that. We were also unlucky in the pandemic. I think that we would have got to a bit more clarity if we hadn't spent 2 years and 400 billion on furlough, all the test and trace, all of those free, tests that we were giving people, so much money spent on communities, giving cash. We basically raided all of the savings that we had made during the first coalition government, and that became evident. On immigration, I mean, I can say this now, as business secretary, even as I was trying to do things to limit immigration, we had an India FTA where they kept trying to bring in migration, and I said no. It's one of the reasons we didn't sign it, because I just wasn't going to. I didn't like the migration
because they wanted too many visas to give us access
and I just didn't
to
think,
their markets.
Yes, but business keeps saying, oh, we need more. So and politicians do listen to business. We need many more people. We don't have the skills here. My view is that we need to train up our own workforce. But sometimes those voices do get heard because there's a short-term fix. And it's not just business. The NHS says, we really need all these people. Come on, we need these visas. I think we were supposed to have had, I heard that, I can't verify, 6,000 was the expected number of care visas, and it ended up being 250,000. And we don't see that until it's too late. So lots of people assume that MPs are seeing all this, and we're all saying, yeah, that's great. We don't find out any sooner than the public does. It's just
that's mad.
Yeah, I know, but we found out late last year about the 750,000.
Why don't ministers ask?
Well, the ministers who can ask are the ones in the Home Office, and that's something that they can explain. It's not something that as a business secretary I would be able to explain. I can tell people what I had been doing, but it's just the way the system works. So there's a lot of trust in there. And sometimes you get well, we can't tell you yet, well, we don't know yet, or we'll find out soon. And if the people are distracted, we had Home Office ministers who were being the same bullying allegations. Pretty, who's also standing, she's a neighbor of mine, we get on very well. She had these bullying allegations. Imagine how distracting that is, where you're trying to do something and people are taking all your attention away to do something else.
All three of us here in this conversation, here we are in the Telegraph. We're all of immigrant stock. We are. How much lower do you think immigration should be, Kemi? And do we need to leave the ECHR to achieve lower immigration? So
it does need to be much lower. I can't give a figure because it would be me putting, a finger in the air. I don't do things like that. I'm only going to say what I know is correct. But I know it needs to be lower because we don't have the housing for all of the people who are coming in. We don't have the money, not just to house, but to look after them. I've got a site on the edge of my constituency, which I campaigned to be made into a prison against a lot of local opposition. People didn't want that, but I said, we need prison places. I stood on a manifesto for prison places. It is now housing asylum seekers. It's become a processing center. That creates a problem for law and order and justice where there's no place to put prisoners because immigration is feeding into so many different areas. It's feeding into housing, it's feeding into education, it's feeding into welfare, it's feeding into prison places and law and order. It does need to be brought down. I don't think that this is contested. But the ECHR is just one of many things that's impacting our immigration figures. The demand that businesses and many others, our business will collapse unless we bring this person in. Legal immigration is higher than illegal immigration. Illegal immigration is unsustainable, but legal immigration is also a factor. That's not an ECHR thing. So ECHR is an example of us going to the end of the problem and trying to tinker with it rather than starting at the root of the problem.
To come to Temic, though, I mean, the various leadership candidates, it won't be lost on you, are positioning themselves around what has become a sort of benchmark issue. Are you prepared to leave the ECHR?
So a lot of people ask me that. And I never say yes or no. I always say it depends. And the reason why is because of what happened over Brexit. I think we all voted, everybody here voted leave, actually. I wasn't an MP when we voted leave. I was just an ordinary person, 50-50, and I thought, actually, I think we can do this, and voted leave.
And your maiden speech was about
Yes,
Brexit.
yes, it was, I was not a gung-ho Brexiteer. I was a pragmatic, this is probably the best way if we're going to succeed. Only to get into Parliament, and there was no plan. So when people say, and we went round and round in circles, when people say, do you want to leave the ECHR? Depends on the plan. There is no plan yet. Let's look at the plan. If it's a bad plan, no. If it's a good plan, yes. But simply saying, I'm going to leave and we'll work it out later.
But you would leave.
That's what, if it was a good plan, I think that, and if we tried other things that hadn't worked, then I certainly would consider it. And I might do if it was the last resort. But other countries who are in the ECHR don't have the same problem of deportations. So ECHR can't be the only thing. And that's one of the things that worries me, that we keep coming up with these single solutions. Oh, if we have Rwanda, everything will be okay. And then we get bogged down in the thing and it doesn't work. ECHR will be the solution. I'm always worried, and this is where my engineering brain comes in. If we just have this one thing, everything will be okay. And that is why I think that the conversation about the ECHR is important, but it is not in and of itself the thing that is going to change our immigration in this country. We've got to start again with what kind of country do we want to be? Is it, the ship of Theseus example, that if you keep bringing in lots of people from everywhere, how do we make sure that we are still the Britain that they wanted to come to? We could end up creating a better country. We could end up creating a worse country. And at the moment, everyone's sitting back and saying, I don't want to talk about immigration. If I was leader of the opposition, I wouldn't be running away from these topics. I have a lot of personal experience, whether when I was a minister working on communities and local government, my own personal experience having, an immigrant background myself, but also just being brave. You can have a leader of the opposition who's just going to say the nice things, we're a successful multicultural country, everything is okay, and everybody just needs to knuckle down and be nice and put out statements, or you can get someone who actually thinks about it from first principles. ECHR is an important component, but you will not hear me make promises that I can't keep. Lots of people make promises. This is why the public don't trust us. We say, we're going to lower immigration, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then it doesn't happen. So what I say is, I might leave the ECHR. It depends on the plan. But with me, you will get somebody who will create a workable plan if that is the right solution, rather than somebody who just talks and then thinks later and can't deliver.
You are now, of course, dependent, your leadership bid is dependent on your 120 colleagues in the House of Commons, there being 121 Tory MPs. I think it's widely predicted that if you get through to the second round, where the Conservative Party members in the country then select, that you will be elected the Conservative leader. But what would you say to those 120 MPs about why they should put you forward?
Well, many of them are my friends, so these are conversations I'm having. And I would say that this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity, and we could do something different. And you all know me well. I'm a very transparent person. There's nothing hidden. There's nothing hidden about me. You know what you're getting. But if you want someone who's going to be tough, who can take tough decisions and withstand them, who's not going to be blowing with the wind, but someone who cares about you and about your life and what you want to achieve, who cares about our party, then I do think that I am the best candidate. I think MPs get a really, really rough deal. We do all sorts of things that people don't know, don't recognize. We're social workers, we're emergency services, as well as legislators. No one knows, for example, that every minister for the last 14 years, every single minister has given back 10% of their salary to the taxpayer. No one says, and people think that we're in it for the money. This is something that David Cameron brought in. It'll be interesting to see if Keir Starmer did it. But when we have problems, we run into trouble, the pressure that comes on us, we get very little sympathy. And I think with me, they would have a leader who understands the pressures of the job and knows that if you want MPs to deliver for the public, we also need to make sure that they are properly supported in as many different ways as possible. But at the end of the day, it's not just about us. It is about our members and eventually the country. I think that the vision of the country that we want to see is a conservative one. I think most people in the country are conservative. But if we start to look like something different, then they won't recognize us as that. And I think that I'm someone who is visibly conservative, not just talking the talk, but also delivering. I have a strong record of delivery, whether it's in business where I signed really good trade deals, Conor can attest to that, whether it was sorting out the mess with the post office long before that TV drama came up. We had already started working on the plans. I spoke about it in my conference speech, where there was somebody who was being obstructive. He was removed. I'm tough enough to make sure that those people who aren't doing the job will go. All of those things, not just the equality stuff, but all of those things, I think, are a testament to what I can do if I'm given responsibility. But it is up to them, and I hope that they will give me that responsibility.
Last couple of questions, if I may. Just briefly, because you are in listening mode, but on net zero, where do you think the debate is now? Do you think the debate is shifting? And what would you think if Labour brought back the ban on new petrol and diesel vehicles from 2030? The Tories, of course, having shifted it in line with the European Union, by the way, to 2035.
I think that would be wrong. Whenever I spoke to car companies, they said that it was very confusing, government going backwards and forwards all the time. And many of them said that they would need more subsidies if they were going to get the electric vehicle quota by 2030. I didn't think that was the right thing. I don't think we should be spending taxpayers' money for car companies so that they can deliver government policy. And that's why it was something that I spoke to Prime Minister at the time, Rishi Sunak, about, that we need to do this. I would have liked us to have gone a bit further, but again, you have to have consensus. No, not necessarily about the year, but about the pressure we were putting on car companies, the quotas. I wanted us to have sort of an observation year. Let's see how this works, rather than just put the policy in. I think sometimes it's very easy for government to just make rules and expect everybody to follow them, even though it's not that straightforward. And that's what I would have liked to see. If Labour brings us back to 2030, it will kill some car companies for sure. At the time when people were finding electric vehicles very expensive, simply forcing car companies to do this means that some of them will go bust if the market is not big enough. You've got to look at the market as well.
Your seat, of course, it was Saffron Walden. It's now North Essex. Nigel Farage is in Clacton, across the other side of the county on the coast. How do you think him being in Parliament is going to change the dynamics of your party, and in particular, this leadership contest of which you are now a part?
I don't know. It's still early days. I haven't seen him very much there. I know he has been there, but I haven't really come across him apart from the first day. No, I don't know him. I've met him once, and he gave an interesting account of the meeting, which I would dispute. But it's just that's just one of the things that you get when you're public figures. Everybody, recollections.
But he's into plain speaking, like you.
Yeah. But I'm not obsessed about what Lib Dems, Reform, Labour are doing. We'll get to that in good time. We need to focus on ourselves, because our party is the one that needs renewing. Reform has done relatively well for a new party. The Lib Dems have had their best result ever. Us fussing about them rather than looking at ourselves is going to be a waste of time. Let's focus on ourselves.
Kemi Badenoch, Conor Burns, thank you very much.